Hello survivors and welcome to Human Flesh, a zombie movie podcast by Resident Evil fans for Resident Evil fans. This is First Aid Spray bonus episode 9. It's time to grab your popcorn for a double bill of films, both titled Dawn of the Dead. My name is Syniac, you can just call me Cy, and joining me in the horde this week, speaking of flesh, he's the only human that I know with a certain podcast logo imprinted on his. Yes, seriously, it's Boy Wonder Adam.
Tattoo machine go brrr.
And I feel terrible for dragging him away from work to make him stare at 4.5 hours of hordes of brain dead people in the mall, but here we are. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Retail is hell. Hello.
The subject of this bonus episode, like all others, was voted on by our Patreon backers. Support the show now to not only keep us afloat, but to also create new content, select what that content is, and hear it a month before everyone else. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/FASprayPod for the full breakdown. So, we've arrived at another Film Club episode, hopefully this one of a slightly different mood, by which I mean most of the films that we've covered on the show's history up to this point have been pretty average at best, or much, much worse, and the occasional bright spark, but I would say we haven't focused on anything that has released to warm reception all around generally, which was something that I thought would be nice to do for once. So racking the brains about it, I thought, well, especially with Resident Evil's anniversary coming up at the time of recording, we should go way further back. Let's look at the sort of origin of the modern zombie. And I thought, George A. Romero films, let's stick the first 3 in the poll, and Dawn of the Dead is the big winner. But as with most other Film Club episodes, we're sort of going to bolster it out with 2 movies. So we're going to be looking at the 1978 original and the 2004 remake as well. So, special shout out in this podcast, there's not any files in films, so we can't do that, but we do have a musical cover from Islandrocks, their cover of the classic Dawn of the Dead theme song, will be in this episode. So if you enjoy that, check the description for a link to their YouTube channel to listen to more of their covers and support them. We appreciate that. So the first film of 2 to discuss is the 1978 original. It came out a decade after the first film in the series, the classic, the original zombie movie, Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Dawn of the Dead holds a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's often cited as being one of the few sequels that are superior to the original. It was selected as one of the 500 greatest movies of all time by Empire magazine in 2008. It was also named as one of the best 1,000 movies ever made in a list published by the New York Times. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave it 4 out of 4 stars and proclaimed it one of the best horror films ever made, and conceded that it's gruesome, sickening, disgusting, violent, brutal, and appalling, but nobody ever said art had to be in good taste. It performed well thanks to commercial advertising and word of mouth. Ad campaigns and posters declared the film the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times. It earned $900,000 on its opening weekend in the US, and the website The Numbers claims it has a worldwide total of $66 million, making it the most profitable film in the franchise. And adjusting that for inflation, 2021 money is $263,670,000, which is nothing to be sniffed at. So, first experiences. Adam, do you remember the first time you saw the original Dawn of the Dead?
I do, yeah. I would have been, well, I say I remember. I don't really remember, but yes, I was probably in my early teens when I first watched this. A friend introduced me to it. And I remember being very enamored with it for its kind of how dated I felt it looked. Because, obviously I was like a 13 or 14-year-old, so like it didn't look particularly good to me at the time. But I remember having a lot of fun with it.
Adam, have you got a dog by any chance?
Yeah, I had a dog just scratching itself. Give me 2 seconds and I'll go again.
It's fine.
She's having a good scratch on her ear right now.
Lay
down, you dear.
I'm leaving this in. I'm just leaving this in at this point.
Oh, okay. Her name's Muffin. Muffin, lay down.
That's amazing.
I'll put pictures in the chat later.
Steve, what was your first exposure to Dawn of the Dead, the original?
This is kind of vague for me. I'm pretty sure I saw the remake first, and then I came back and watched the original out of curiosity.
Yeah.
I was kind of late to the George A. Romero stuff. I distinctly remember my first George A. Romero film being the 1990 remake of the original Night of the Living Dead. So definitely late on this one for the bus.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, to be fair, none of us definitely would have saw this on release, as I say. It's a fair bit old.
I jumped in the DeLorean and I went back and saw it.
Okay.
It was definitely late. Late 2000s. I was going to say 20,000s. No, that's not words. That's not English. It was definitely late 2000s for me.
Fair enough. Mine probably would be early 2000s, I reckon. It was one of those things where I sort of grew up as... I'm not really... It's funny. I think I've probably said this before. I don't know. But I'm not really a horror film person, despite, the Resident Evil podcast thing. I don't really watch many horror films, but I grew up with sort of fascinations on the paranormal and sort of monsters and stuff, especially zombies. And I was always like drawing zombies and stuff like that, just because they're so malleable. Drawing zombies is fun because you can do whatever the hell you want, missing eyes, missing limbs, all kinds of nonsense. And that was something that I really enjoyed, and my parents definitely noticed, because I remember my dad sort of supplied me this is really dating it, but a recorded off of TV VHS, where you would just leave it on overnight when the film was on and just slap it on a blank tape. Dawn of the Dead, because I was interested in zombies and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, just check this out, because, it's this classic film. And I remember having mixed feelings. I was very young at the time, really. I probably shouldn't have been watching it, in all fairness. But I remember being very bored by the good chunk of the opening. I knew about the mall. I wanted to get to see the zombies, so I was really not that engaged until we got to that point. That's my prevailing memory of it. I remember being kind of sort of like about most of it, but some of the zombie scenes definitely sort of stood the test of time in my memory. So this is sort of the first time I've gone back and watched it properly. And I definitely appreciated it lots and lots more, to be fair. So the story of Dawn of the Dead, as I've sort of referenced there, in its most basic form, the continuation of the zombie apocalypse from the first film. It's a sequel really only in concept and in universe. There's no carryover of plot elements or characters really, other than zombies have risen for reasons unknown. And it sees a sort of ragtag group of survivors, as has become sort of the standard of the zombie genre, trying to find a place to hide out, and doing so, at least temporarily, in an abandoned mall, or at least they plan to be temporarily, touching down in a helicopter. That is sort of the basics of it, I guess. Adam, what's your thoughts on the story, and I guess the impact of the fact zombies in a mall has become a big thing, like Dead Rising and stuff like that. When that came out, everyone was like, "Hey, it's basically a Dawn of the Dead game." This is, I'd say, it's set the standard.
Well, as you said, very basic story. Not wanting to sort of put the carrot in front of the donkey here, but I really didn't really enjoy my current viewing of this movie.
Okay.
It's funny because when we watched, I think it was the original Resident Evil, and I said, hey, you could watch this movie without sound and it would be fine. You could watch this movie without sound. There isn't a story in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a setup. People go and escape and stay at a mall. That's a setup for a movie. And that is this movie. There's not really any plot.
I mean, that's fair, actually.
If you could tell me like what the underlying story is, you would just say there's survivors that go to a mall and there's zombies there. Yeah. That's the whole thing. It doesn't have a story. Which is, I mean, it's fine. It's a kind of a fun movie. It's way too long. It's like 2.5 hours. It's like an hour too long. the most story in this movie is that the woman is pregnant and maybe she should get an abortion. That's really the big character beat of the movie.
Right. Oh my
Other
god,
than
when you
that,
said
there's
hot
no-
takes, I didn't.
Other than that, there's no character progression. There's no story in this movie. There's a plot. There's like a plot outline, and that's pretty much it. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot good to say about the movie. I do understand its significance.
Mm-hmm.
I do like its plot setup and its ideas. I just don't, another hot take from me here is I really don't think George Romero is a filmmaker. But, there's not really much of a story going on here. Like I said, you could watch this movie without sound on. There is no piece of information or dialogue in this film that changes any part of it or makes any part of it really something to pay attention to.
Okay, excellent. I've got some rebuttals for some of that, so I'm excited.
Good.
But,
yeah, that's great.
It's hard to disagree with what the point you're making is that the lack of story. It really is all about setup. Steve, what do you think of the story, or I guess
the narrative?
Yeah, the narrative, if you like. Yeah.
For what it is, right? When we get the glimpses of the wider world and the actual story about how it's going down, I find that more compelling than our leads. But I'm gonna just rebut Dear Adam, because you literally have 4 disparate survivors, and they're basically 2 pairs who don't really know each other all that well, and they have to come to terms with working together and getting over it. And then there's the arc of Fran. They are basic bare bones arcs, but we have the arc of Peter learning how to deal with other human beings, as they apparently don't know how to deal with them. We've got Fran, who wants to learn how to be a pilot or fly the helicopter and be more capable and be basically respected by her lightly misogynistic companions. And then there's Steve, who is a complete idiot who doesn't know how to fire a gun in the entirety of the film, despite being taught how to learn it. And his character arc is learn how to fire a gun, miss, and die horribly.
All of the
Also,
things you
Roger
just
is
said
there.
are like each person gets like 2 lines in the film to explain that.
I didn't say it was great. Roger's got an interesting arc as well, where he basically it's more showing the mental degradation of zombification as a character arc, and he becomes more feral and bestial until he dies. I'm not saying it's great, but then you have glimpses of like the wider world and like seeing how the police go completely to town on this poor group of people in the projects, and biker gangs literally becoming feral clowns with assault rifles, thinking it's funny to raid and attack people. It's definitely the scope of things in Dawn of the Dead is more interesting to me than the actual core characters.
Right.
Do
you know?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. It's funny because I have sort of fallen into the wider reaction, I think, of sort of like looking at this as a Stone Cold classic, because I find things to pick up on there that I guess you guys didn't, and that's fine, that's great. I agree the story is very basic, and some of the arcs might be a little bit basic as well, but I think it's very much like a theme piece, like a mood piece. It's very much about tone and stuff like that. I didn't remember sort of the assault on the projects at the beginning of the film, but to be honest, watching that, like, it made me really uncomfortable, those scenes. And maybe
especially
that's
because it's like, isn't the main cop the quote unquote psychopath cop is literally just doing it for racist fun,
racist kicks, which maybe that's why as well. It's very prevalent, obviously, in media in the last couple of years as well. So, and it's sad to see something from a film from what are we looking at 40 something years ago to be. Yeah, just to reflect that, and it feels in ways hasn't changed. But I thought that was really cutting. Before that, even you got the total panic and of the TV and the radio broadcast sort of going down. I wouldn't have got that as a kid, but I thought that was kind of like and over the course of the film, sort of like a realistic portrayal of the breakdown of TV broadcasting and how it just sort of becomes people arguing.
To me, that's honestly like was what I enjoyed most, and I was upset that it finished. Like it was obviously done with kind of early in the movie-ish, because, and I think I only enjoyed it because of today's sort of situations,
right?
Where, you know, in the past, and we've talked about it, I think even in the early sort of film clubs, where we were like, this isn't how people would act, it's stupid. But we've seen, you know, unfortunately over the last year or so, we've seen very real world examples that people will act in such a way to a big worldwide global issue, you know, and the fact that it opened with like conflicting TV personalities talking about how you can't just shoot these people, or, you know, this is stupid, we have to let them live and stuff like that. And like it if you had watched it 2 years ago even, you'd be like, this is dumb, no one would be saying that. But obviously, as we've seen in our very real situation, like, unfortunately there are people in the world that are like would-be zombie deniers. You know, they would be like, no, I'm still gonna go to the shops. Like, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
The
Like,
fact that he's saying this hits home so hard. Like, I feel like we're all spiritually attached to Eye Patch Man, who literally is saying you need to kill them, and just get on with it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if you had gone back, like I say, a few years, he would be the guy that you'd be like, oh, this guy, like, he's just whatever. But it is something in this film's credit, but it's not because of this film, it's because of the real world.
Sure.
But yes, that was a very good take and a very interesting thing given our circumstances, and I did enjoy that. Because it was thoughtful for being so long ago. You know, it did tap into a very real world reaction that there are people that will always kind of be deniers or conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. So that was well done. It just kind of dropped off for me after that.
Fair enough. Before I get to sort of my thoughts on the meat of the story, also, while we're talking about sort of almost like external forces going on around it, one other bit that I thought was sort of sickeningly real was there's a scene where they're flying over the countryside, and then you get just a cutaway bunch of shots of people with all their trucks drinking beer, arming themselves up to go round shooting zombies and treating it, you know, like hunting game. Even I just, you know, watching that was just like, wow, that is probably very realistic. And again, that probably is, like you say, just the timing of watching this movie, which was not intentional, that it would sort of reflect sort of the current status of the real world and stuff. But I found that similar kind of thing where I was like, yeah, that's kind of believable now, and it probably wouldn't have been if we'd have watched it 2 years ago, as you said. In terms of the pacing and the length of the film, I agree. It feels long. It feels longer than 2 hours. It feels months long, and I loved that about it. I just thought it was great.
Oh God!
No, I love that because you got to experience this awkward group of characters, as Steve said, that, you know, these sort of two subsets of characters coming together that don't really know each other, and dealing with each other, especially three of them. So many pieces of media, and zombie media especially, do the sort of, as I say, ragtag group of survivors, of strangers having to come together. And this, maybe it's an example of other things just doing it better, but this is very much the original of that. And the original of all the themes, like, you know, people are the threat is one that comes up sort of near the end. And the obvious one, obviously, when you talk about this, it's almost been done to death, is maybe they're coming to the mall because of trace memory, and it's about commercialism and blah, 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 stuff like that. But whilst I would have understood that when I watched it the first time when I was a kid, and I would have picked up on that, it was stuff like the racism and the awkward character arcs that everyone goes through that I thought as an adult were much more interesting to me. I picked up much more on sort of character idiosyncrasies. You know, you mentioned sort of Franny's outside of the male gang story, because she sort of struggles because she's a normal lady. She's not like not a badass like kicking zombie dogs in the head in the air sort of Alice stupid badass. But she gets sort of... I was watching it thinking, it's a shame because her character's being suffocated by all these other male characters and egos. But in the full context of it, she's pregnant. She learns how to fire weapons off a rooftop. She learns how to fly a helicopter. Maybe she is a badass. Maybe just like a normal everyday badass. She doesn't have to fly through the air and do Matrix super moves. You know, I thought that was kind of interesting. Probably at the time, not so much. Maybe it wasn't meant that way. It was a little bit
she
like...
holds off a zombie with a flare. Not many characters you can say in most forms of fiction manage to discover that fireworks work on, well, at least Romero zombies.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to that as well.
That's crazy scene.
And in terms of Stephen, I actually thought he was quite interesting as well, because I found his driving force about masculinity as well, and sort of being self-conscious about his own, compared to the two soldier dudes who have got it locked down and they're working together to do all these things, and they kind of keep him out of some of the more actiony stuff to do, sort of doing the things that need to be done, until he sort of has to learn to pull his weight, and he has to pull his weight because there's only three of them. And then in the end of it all, he dies because he's sort of too comfortable with them all, and he wants to cling on to it rather than leaving. They decide to stay there, and that's something that he wants. And in the end, he thinks he's got it, but he doesn't. And yeah, you get the Steve Zombie. But I'm just waffling. I could totally waffle about this film, and I'm probably gonna do it some more. But I will hit pause. Adam, what do you think are sort of like the themes and the tone? Less so the story, but the overall tone of the film.
Yeah, this is probably where I like it a lot. It has good themes. It is, in a way, emotionally intelligent. It touches on, a lot of, like we've already said, like, there's kind of nods to racism and sexism and some misogyny, and it never does it really, really heavy-handedly or awkwardly, in my opinion, to its credit. It and the whole kind of idea of the kind of capitalism of like the zombies knowing to go to the mall and stuff. It's very interesting. I think for as kind of janky as the zombies are, but that's, just a sign of the times. The zombies are kind of interesting compared to modern zombies, which are truly just kind of like mindless creatures. These zombies kind of have a bit of something to them, They have a little bit of personality.
Yeah.
And that's nice to see, it makes it more interesting. It's well done in that sense. Like I said, my big issues really are the kind of lack of story, and we'll get into some of the other kind of little issues that I have as we go along. But and I feel like you said you enjoyed the length of the film. For me, it was too long. There's a lot of filler, and some of that is good. Some of it adds a little character, but a lot of it for me is kind of superfluous. But I enjoy the theme and the tone. I think that there is good thought behind a lot of the stuff going on here.
Yeah, I think showing the passage of time in film is quite difficult. If you to do it in the right way, it's very easy for it to suddenly jump around and sort of be disorientating. So maybe that's why I liked it, is that they use that time to show the passage of time.
That's a great point.
The months in
that's
there,
actually a good point that I would kind of turns me on to it a bit more, because when we talk about the next film we're going to talk about, that seems like it happens in a couple of hours.
Right, totally. Yeah. And I'll admit maybe
we'll
on a
get
rewatch,
into that.
Yeah, I maybe on a rewatch, some of those scenes are definitely going to drag. But as someone who essentially is coming in blind to a lot of it, I enjoyed it on a sort of quote unquote first watch, not necessarily.
That's fair. I would definitely kind of come round to that idea, I think.
Steve, thoughts?
Because
on the
it
tone?
does feel like you watch it for months. So,
Steve, thoughts on the tone?
Generally, it's this is going to sound really mean, but it always feels oppressively bleak, even in the moments when it's trying to be light. Like, it might be my mindset, but this feels like the Silent Hill 2 in terms of emotional range. Like, it's always those downswing bits, and any bits that are light are like, more of a back to it, kind of in a grim way. I don't know if that's high praise or what, considering we'll have to get to the Silent Hill 2 stuff. Spoilers. Yeah, it's. I would say it's consistent, except for like the opening the ending 5 minutes. But I don't know if we're going to go that far into spoiler town yet.
Yeah, we can touch on that.
Do you guys know about the original ending of this film? How it was originally going to play out?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Do not know.
Sorry, you're like the lore buff in the Dawn of the Dead.
Apparently. Yeah, so originally in the script, the plan was for them to commit suicide, I believe. So in the sort of... we've talked a lot about spoilers already, so I don't think I need to put a spoiler warning. So in the final sort of scenes, Peter appears to be contemplating suicide with his little Derringer pistol, and Franny gets up onto the roof with the helicopter. He was going to shoot himself, and she was going to decapitate herself with the rotary blades. I think that's right. Which obviously the zombie who does that earlier in the film was meant to be the setup to that moment, sort of for her to sort of be inspired by that, I suppose. But instead, I think maybe even during production they sort of changed their mind on that and decided to leave it ambiguous. I know actually the other thing about that other ending was the credits were going to play over the helicopter blades, and then they were going to stop near the end, sort of implying that they wouldn't have got that far anyway, which I thought that's what a cool idea. That being said, I think I prefer the ending that they went with, actually.
See, that's the thing. As ridiculously bleak and like black-heartedly hopeless the non-ending would have been. The one that we have feels so much like it's in a different film, because Peter goes from literally contemplating suicide to Macho Man Randy savaging like 6 zombies hand to hand without getting
That's
sick.
something I actually wanted to bring up, which is I'm glad that you said that it kind of changed, because to me it was such a tonal shift where he was like, I'm not going, basically, like, you go. I'm going to stay here and basically defend your exit. And then, like, all of a sudden, and the tone of how he says it and stuff is very defeated. And then all of a sudden, he like runs out the door and is like, "Let's do this," kind of thing.
The A-Team theme starts playing.
Yeah.
He's doing his best Frank West on the zombies. And don't be wrong, it's a fun scene. Like, there's a lot of fun action scenes in this film. Just doesn't fit the tone of the film at all.
Right, exactly. It does. Why does he suddenly do a U-turn that quickly?
Which is strange, because Peter's like my favourite in this film.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, we'll definitely touch a bit more on characters, but you've both mentioned things about the zombies that I definitely want to touch on as well. They are kind of probably the most aged part of the film, I would say. My first note is literally, the blue makeup. Which apparently was because obviously the first film's in black and white, so they were just trying to go for an ashen look, and it sort of wound up blue. So for the most part, they don't look like zombies as you picked them today. Most of them just look like blue people, like gone off blue.
Yeah, you could rename this movie like the Smurfs movie, and it would be
the Smurfs Strike
like
Back.
a weird horror Smurf movie.
It's Smurfs with bright red blood, like luminous red, which apparently was chosen like for a comic book feel. But I don't know about that, because I didn't really get a comic book. I get maybe graphic novels, but in the 70s, really, I don't know. Sure, it's a bright looking film, but as Steve said, the tone is pretty bleak. Like, there's sections where they're basically mourning the fact that they've tombed themselves in here, that they're overzealous to be like, hey, we've got a whole mall to ourselves, we can just do whatever we want, is probably going to be their downfall. Doesn't really jive with the brightly coloured zombie blood and the blue skin, but maybe that's just a retrospect kind of thing. The other thing, as Steve brought up, this is so weird, this totally confused me. Zombies are adverse to fire in this, which is not a thing that carries over into other films. You see it in stuff like Resident Evil, they'll catch fire and they just keep going. In this, they don't seem to want to deal with it. It either causes them pain, I guess, or they can feel the temperature. I thought it was just so weird.
I can only think of one other, technically the Dead Rising games, I suppose. And another George A. Romero film, Land of the Dead, where a big plot point is that fireworks and loud explosions and stuff like that distract them. I kind of thought it was that kind of thing, like especially when Fran's holding that flare up against the, I want to say, I apologize if this is not correct, the Hare Krishna zombie.
I think that's correct.
I want to say it's some kind of photosensitivity thing. Because she's not.
I think the actor just couldn't stare into the flare.
Or it completely bamboo, like, it's a chaff grenade on Metal Gear. It's completely bamboozling it.
Callback.
Keeping it in the nerd speak. The zombies in this film seem to have two modes. They're either mega deadly and will tear you apart, or they're almost docile. That's a strange juxtaposition compared to most zombie fiction, I think. Even Night of the Living Dead, they were kind of consistently a slow droning force, whereas in this they're kind of almost meek until they're in kill mode, and then they'll just sever a limb by casually brushing against you.
Fair.
That's not a knock on it. I think it's a nice quirk to them, the fact that they literally are like brutes who don't know their own strength.
I'd say I feel like they lost their threat for a while, which actually kind of worked for me, because sort of like the characters figure out how to outmaneuver them, and they decide they're going to clear them all out of them, and then we don't really see them for a little bit. And then the next time we see them, they're getting literally pie-faced by the raiders. They're getting cream pies in their face, and I thought, oh, that's... But then immediately after that, when everyone's too busy fighting amongst each other and all these zombies are pouring in, then they get vicious all of a sudden right at the end, and you get the most grotesque, gory stuff right at the end of the film, as you should. It's people being pulled apart and stuff like that. I thought that was a really interesting... I couldn't really say there's an arc for the zombies, that'd be a bit weird. But it's a really interesting way to take them, where they start out as the absolute threat, and then the characters and the audience just sort of get used to them not being around. And then when they come back, they're like, oh yeah, killing machines, by the way. Adam, you sort of touched on your thoughts of the zombies. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what you just said is pretty spot on. I think that whether knowingly or not, Romero kind of feeds into the fact that we kind of get complacent with them. We're like, oh yeah, it's zombies. We've been dealing with them. And then when they come back in much greater numbers, you're suddenly like, oh yeah, this is not good. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, the zombies in this film, just as they are just such a non-threat. It's
That's
funny.
Get you, Adam.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. But
they're calm and complacent, and then they'll brush you and your arm will fall off.
Right, exactly. But it's what really bothers me about this movie is that as soon as a human gets within 2 feet of a zombie, they just forget how to act like a human or fight. Everyone's flailing as a human, or in the beginning, as they're running out, there's 2 zombies, and Steve just runs directly into a zombie's arms, and they fall down together. So stupid, and then Fran just watches. Bad. She just stands and watches while he struggles to get a random hammer that's in some grass. And then it's just whenever someone gets next to a zombie, it's like the zombie virus is contracted to them in terms of their brain, because no one can act like a human. When you watch the fight at the end, there's biker dudes hitting zombies in the chest with dumbbells and stuff, and and it just no one knows how to fight. It's just so hilarious. It's like the zombies and the humans are evenly matched when they get into a scrap. That's one of the things that really bothered me, because it's in the record store or something, that the zombie grabs Peter or whatever on the ground, and then the other 3 characters just stand and watch. Okay, deal with that. No one tries to help or pull something. It's just crazy to me. It's these zombies are so lame, and yet the human characters can't help but just be completely inept when it comes to stopping themselves. Like when the Hare Krishna zombie is trying to get into the room and Fran just stacks some boxes up in like a single pile. Like, don't stack boxes like that if you want to block a door. You're dumb. But yeah, it's funny. Like, I get it because there has to be some sort of tension, so the human characters have to kind of act a little dumb, because otherwise it would be a very like, well, this is basically how we stop zombies getting us, especially in this movie. So yeah, that to me, they're interesting, but they're not a threat like other zombie movies have made zombies scary. This movie, the zombies weren't at all scary, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I didn't particularly find them scary, and I said this before on the Cockneys versus Zombies podcast, and let's just be thankful we're not talking about that film right now, I guess. I don't like when the joke is, haha, zombie did something stupid. If you're going to have a comedy zombie film, do the comedy around it and leave the zombies as zombies. But that being said, the biggest laugh in this film is the zombie who takes the gun off of Roger, and then right at the end of the film, he's there on the rooftop getting the payoff when he gets his gun swapped out. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's been a few weeks now, but they have him carrying that gun around for however long this film takes place over. I think it's months.
Right.
You know, he's carrying this gun around, facing the wrong way with it. I don't know. Just seeing that again just really, really made me laugh. But yeah, like as you said, there's some interesting parts of these zombies as well, because they use tools and stuff, which is not something that you really saw in later zombie stuff. And the fire thing is not something that you see in many zombie stuff. And even what you said, Adam, about sort of, people will get sort of complacent about the zombies. This is like the second big zombie film. I don't know if George A. Romero did that on purpose, but if he did, he's a genius. Because, I mean, we're in 2021 now. Zombie has become a genre over the last 15 years. People are definitely complacent. So I don't know, but it's an interesting point nonetheless. We touched on characters, so let's circle back around to any other points on characters. Steve, was there any characters that stood out to you as good or bad, or any moments that stood out?
Like I said, it's mostly the ancillary stuff. Like, I love the newscasters having their own, like, meltdown at the start of the film, and depressed eye patch man who's basically saying, no, you need to wear a mask, you need to social distance, as people just ignore any kind of safety guidelines. Political commentary. No, I'm kidding. But everyone else is kind of fine. Like, it doesn't. The character arcs start to, like, warm a bit in the middle, because they literally have got them all safe. So I suppose they have to do the character development parts. But realistically, it's mostly just a bit humdrum, which is a bit harsh. I like the characters, but there's not a lot going on.
Fair enough. Adam, any standout stuff for you, good or bad?
I think I would sort of echo Steve there, where some of the ancillary stuff is interesting. Like, I've always loved Tom Savini in a movie.
Yeah.
And he could have been used a lot better in this one. Like, I know he's not an actor per se, but he always brings something that I really enjoy. And I wish he had a bit more to do in this movie.
Would you like some trivia, Adam?
Sure.
His character, is the only through link to a direct Romero sequel, in that his zombie from this film appears in Land of the Dead. That's the second time I mentioned that film today. But Blades, as he is, somehow gets out of that mall and spends the next 20 years motoring around in the Georgia.
Is Land of the Dead the one where the kid has the camcorder and it's a lot of...
No, it's the
That's
one with
Survival, I think.
the armored van. And,
okay, yeah. I think I've seen both, but it honestly kind of blurs for me because I watched them once in the theatrical release, and that was enough for me. But Tom Savini, super cool. I wish we could have seen more of him. He always brings a very kind of wild energy, which I enjoy. Peter was good, very stoic, kind of. I always kind of see him as, like, especially in that era, as maybe like an ex-military, a bit haunted by maybe some things he's kind of seen or done. he's very kind of stoic about the whole thing. Other than that, there's not a lot that I really enjoy here in terms of characters.
Just to piggyback off your point, Peter and Roger, I do like how it subverts how, the general process of horror and slasher films go, in that Roger is introduced almost as a protagonist for a while, and then he gets bitten and has to get shot, which is nice. And then Peter pretty much becomes the leader of the team. I say team in the loosest term, but the one who says goes. And I like that as well. And Roger's just completely falling to pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger's a chump.
He loses it after he gets bitten, pretty much.
He does. He gets that adrenaline rush. He dies because of his own bravado, which I thought was quite interesting, because he starts the film off sort of stepping in to help out this stranger, this other military presence in Peter, deal with the situation at the project. So I thought it was quite an interesting through line for him to sort of step up at the horrible moment, to then just kind of fall apart. I remember that was one scene that definitely caught my attention when I watched it when I was much younger, is the transformation of that character into a zombie. And maybe that's because I hadn't seen it before, been done on a film or on TV or anything. But nevertheless, I still thought it was particularly well done. But yeah, Peter is obviously a big standout, wonderfully portrayed, and sort of his interactions with characters like Roger and stuff like that I thought were wonderful. And Romero, yet again, we touched on sort of like the racism angle of this film, and that is all over it, really. And to have, as you said, Steve, sort of, he's the main character. You don't realise that at the beginning. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that way, but he is the lead character. And to have a black lead, again, in the 70s, and obviously it's in the first film as well. And that film has massive racial overtones as well. But yeah, just to continue to push that in the 70s, I thought is very cool. And it stands up the test of time. He's definitely the magnanimous one of the lot. Other than that, I think I said my piece on sort of most of the arcs. They work as a unit. I couldn't watch a film that was about any of them sort of as the lead. If it wasn't him, it probably would have fallen apart for me. The rest of them sort of work off of each other. Some of the acting early on is pretty shaky, but for the most part, I thought
the priest in the project.
That one confused me.
God.
Yeah.
Who was that? Was that like an investor or like his uncle or?
Yeah, maybe.
It had to be just. I mean, the way he delivered his lines was just unreal. I was like, "What is this?"
Yeah, that's not a great sort of foot to start on with this film, is it? It's not a great first step, but yeah, it definitely gets going after that. Okay, so I guess we should summarize the 78 version before we move on. I'm going to start, I guess, get my praise out of the way. I think this film has been very much imitated ever since. Dead Rising, one of them, but maybe not so much. But lots of tropes and stuff have appeared numerous times after this film, and it's never ever been outdone, I don't think, in terms of themes and tones and just a complete package. It makes you think. It's trite to say that, it sounds so silly, but it does make you think, and that's quite surprising considering how many of its core elements have had a bite taken out of them and then spat back out so many times that this still had that effect on me. It bowled me over. I was like, yeah, do you know what? This is a great film. I get it now. The film student in me was beaming. I think it's, dated in areas, but otherwise timeless. And for me, Adam, let's go in the opposite direction maybe. What's your sort of final verdict on the
having this conversation has warmed me to the movie a little more, to be honest. That you guys have said some stuff that has made sense. I still think outside of it having helicopters and stuff in it, it still looks like a student film to me. It doesn't really have a story. It doesn't have character arcs, but it has, it's somewhat the birth of the modern zombie genre. And that has to be praised. It's arguable that we wouldn't have Resident Evil without this movie.
Almost certainly.
And exactly. So I cannot fault it for that. As much as I feel like it was too long and there wasn't really much going on and it was a bit hokey, it was treading new ground, you know, even more so than Night of the Living Dead. It does a lot more interesting things, and as you say, it's been imitated and aped in probably every zombie movie since. There's probably something in every single zombie movie and game that has a nod somewhere in it to this film, and as such, I can't be mad at it. But for me, it's not a movie I need to watch, really, again, I don't think.
That's fair. I can understand that. I am definitely on the other side of the fence, because I was looking at it, I was like, oh, there's 3 different cuts. All right, which one are we tracking down next? Steve, what's your final thoughts on the 78 Dawn of the Dead?
So I guess I'm the one in the middle. We've got Cy being the super fan and Adam being the hypercritical, and I'm just like, it's all right. Don't get the director's cut. Don't watch the full massive edition. Get the briefest version you can to cut the filler out. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. There's just some stuff messes with the flow and how it goes. But as a cornerstone, as a foundation of the genre, just as my co-podcasters have said, it literally, it's the template of things that would follow it on, like Walking Dead with a horde of people, and the way the character dynamics have to develop over time, and they're trapped in environments. And yet again, humans are the real bastards. It seems hokey and maybe a little bit formulaic, but that's the point. It's the origin of the modern zombie. So yeah, I can't complain. Plus, you know, Keenan's dad from Keenan and Kel's pretty badass. At the end for 5 minutes.
Brilliant.
There's one bit I want to complain about, actually. This is a real bit that gets on my nerves, right? They spend a good 20 minutes of the film trying to get a single wheelbarrow of stuff around the bloody thing, and it makes me so mad. Wasted time. Just shoot the damn things and be... No, realistically, though, student film or not, it's a landmark. I think overhyped maybe a little bit, but, you know, origin points tend to be.
Yeah, that's fair. I think almost worth saying, with it being the granddaddy almost, probably do seek it out and watch it once. Your mileage, obviously, clearly, may vary. But I think everyone should at least give it a go to sort of look back on where zombie media really kicked it up a notch. let's cover the remake, the 2004 version. Was written by James Gunn, who you may know now behind Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Twitter jokes that have aged terribly. Zack Snyder, in his directorial debut, who is now known for maybe or maybe not directing Justice League and making a cut of it that promises to be longer than the rest of your life by the sound of it. So big careers to come out of both of those guys. This film was always going to happen. But it's worth saying that George A. Romero himself said it was better than I expected. He did say the first 15 or 20 minutes were terrific, but he also said it sort of lost its reason for being after that. It was more of a video game. I'm not terrified of things running at me. It's like Space Invaders. There's nothing going on underneath. A review aggregation website, Rotten Tomatoes, gave the film 75% approval rating from 187 critics, with an average of 6.7 out of 10. And it has a 59 out of 100 on Metacritic, which is mixed or average. The film grossed $59 million in the US box office and $102 million worldwide. And for the sake of argument, adjusted for 2021 money, that is $140 million or more, which is something like half the original film. But man, it's hard to believe in a way that this film is 16 or 17 years old. I remember seeing this when it came out on DVD. I definitely watched it for like a Halloween thing around the time that it came out. And I remember specifically because it came out at the same time as Shaun of the Dead. I think literally one of them had their release dates moved. I think that's right, to make way for the other one because they didn't want to compete two zombie films at the same time. And I definitely remember that because that year I did a Shaun of the Dead costume for my Halloween thing. So there I was dressed as Shaun watching Dawn of the Dead 2004 with very vague memories of the original still rattling around in my brain. Steve, what was your first experience with the 2004 one? You said you saw it before the original, so...
I did. I saw this one at the cinema.
Right.
My memories are flaky, to say the least, but I do remember enough that I enjoyed it enough at the time to seek out and watch the original because I was craving more.
Mm-hmm.
That opinion may or may not have changed.
Okay. And Adam, what was your first exposure to the remake?
Yeah, I also saw this at the cinema, and I remember enjoying it a lot. Not necessarily thinking it's a great film, but thinking it was a very enjoyable film to see at the cinema, like an experience.
Yeah, that's fair.
And again, my opinions may or may not have changed.
You know, I think I'm probably somewhat in the same boat. I definitely enjoyed it when I first saw it as a teenager, sort of, freshly off the back of something like Shaun of the Dead and being a Resident Evil fan and just being like, yeah, zombie movies. Again, not watching horror, but I'll watch people get torn limb from limb and stuff, apparently. I don't know. But, yeah, my opinion of it is it's a bit up and down. We'll get there, definitely. So let's talk about the story to start with. So the plot points of this film that it shares with the original, arguably, is all of it, I guess, if you wanted to get the most basic, sort of Adam-style review. But it is, there are zombies, people go to the mall. But that's about the only similarity, I would say. After that, it's very much its own beast. The characters are their own thing. It's not a shot-for-shot or anything like that. As I say, it's a whole brand new cast.
The only similarities between the two films at a bare bones level is there is a mall in it.
Yes. And there's some use of TV footage at the beginning that I thought was like a nice little nod, maybe, over the sort of opening titles, and they're watching.
I think that there are more nods to it in less direct ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's character cameos and names. But what I'm getting at is literally the bare bones thing you need to know about Dawn of the Dead is it set in a mall? It's Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't speak to Capcom about that because didn't they have to deal with lawsuits because Dead Rising set in a mall?
This is the funny thing. I was going to bring this up, right? Dead Rising had to put a disclaimer out, which is probably just to hype up their own game. Let's be fair.
Yeah, well,
right?
That's fair.
But then I see, and their opening shot as they descend to the mall is, I swear, Capcom must have just took a photo of it and ripped it off the Willamette. Because that opening entryway is the Willamette Mall.
Yeah.
So I'll give them that one. They can have that one.
So the story therein, I'll at least start, and I'm happy to say that the opening to this film definitely lived up to my expectation of what I remember. Think the sort of opening, as Romero himself did, the opening 15 or 20 minutes, fantastically frenetic. There's just like so much panic going on, seen through the eyes of this one person. So good that Resident Evil Retribution just ripped it off wholesale. Let's be honest, that whole bit with that film where Alice is in a suburban home, that is this Dawn of the Dead remake. They wanted to do that. So I'm really happy that lives up to expectation, but we'll see about the rest of it. Adam, what did you think of... Let's start at least with the opening, because I thought that was quite striking and definitely different compared to the original, at least.
I believe this opening has one of the best moments of any zombie media ever.
Okay.
And that is the husband, boyfriend, whoever he is, gets bit, obviously, becomes a zombie. He's chasing her, and then he immediately just takes a sharp left and grabs somebody else.
yeah, I love
and
that.
That's perfect. It perfectly shows what a zombie is in this media, at least. Because in other media, there's always seems to be some sort of emotion or something tied into it. Whereas this is just like, this guy's going for her because she's the closest source of food, and then bam, there's another source of food. Done. He just turns left and goes and grabs that. And that to me is like a great zombie moment, and we don't see enough of that. Now this is the closest thing. Let's just eat that instead.
I thought that was a really cool visual moment, but you've actually, there's definitely more weight to it when you put it that way, because when you sort of do these sort of like couple stuff in zombie fiction and one of them gets turned, inevitably, the boyfriend, girlfriend, they're going to have to deal with each other. But he goes from being boyfriend to just zombie, because as you say, he's just more interested in whatever the closest meal is. So fair point.
Yeah, I love that. I love that moment.
Yeah. Say again, Steve?
I'd say there's zero emotional melodrama. It's just pure instinct.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what did you think of the opening in general?
One of the strongest in zombie fiction. I'm going to be honest. Like the way it all goes down pretty much overnight. There's like the vaguest hints of it in the ward when Anna's working, and then she goes home, does her coupley thing with a fella, and they go to bed, and then wake up and it's just stuff has gotten real.
Yeah,
is crazy. I think there are some cartoonish moments to the opening, like a car spiraling to a petrol station.
Makes me laugh every time.
Well, everything else is pretty spot on for just chaos. And like, she's perfectly fine. Her neighbor, who she's probably known most of her life, is pulling a gun out on her. Only gets floored by an ambulance.
Which is hilarious. Yeah,
hilarious.
It's just seeing things like that destabilize and get worse and worse and worse to the point where she gets knocked out in a car crash is pretty strong. Like, I'm trying to think of other zombie films that have introductions as stuff kicks off that can compete, and realistically I don't think so. Most of the time they skip past this bit, which I suppose is easier. Like 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, they normally just cut past the apocalypse. Seeing it actually formulate in front of you in a slightly slapstick fashion is pretty good. You even have that moment with the child there where their first thought is the child okay? Oh, okay, jugular, tasty, itchy, tasty. It's brutal.
Yeah, it definitely is. If you can tell, Zack Snyder is a big name now, and you can see it that it was going to happen just looking at this, like his directing in this opening bit for that sort of action craziness is chef's kiss. It's very happy with it.
Yeah, in comparison to the first film, it's if the first film's an art house flick, this is the popcorn variant. At least it's
100%. Yeah, I like the fact that it's not just wake up to an apocalypse as well. We get little bits of it before. Like, she's at the hospital, some guy has been bitten. Oh, well, he's in the ICU now. Why is he in the ICU? He was just bitten on the hand. And then, she goes home, she sees her man, they do their shower lovemaking scene. And while they're doing that, the TV switches to an emergency broadcast, which they miss. So there's little hints of something happening before you walk out the door and suddenly everything is happening. So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously we'll talk about zombies later, but being that it is a quote-unquote fast zombie film, yeah, you could very easily get to this, from point A to point B overnight with how quickly that kind of thing can spread. So, yeah, I totally agree. The fact they missed all these signs or whatever, and then they go to sleep for, 8 hours or whatever, 7 hours it is, and boom, wake up and into hell. The exploding gas station, by the way, or whatever it is, I think is a nod to the original Night of the Living Dead, speaking of nods, because it gets a mention. So that was them sort of paying homage. And as you mentioned, you get sort of the cameos and stuff from here on out from everyone. So that's nice to see. But yeah, as I say, when we get to the mall, it's kind of its own beast. So Adam, what did you think of... Again, I'm hesitant to call this a story as well, but maybe you enjoyed this one more. What do you think of the story of Dawn of the Dead?
No, you're right. Again, it's very light on the story. I would say that its dialogue is more entertaining, but I would also say it's more of an entertaining film. And not to say that it is a better film, but it's more entertaining. It's more fun. It's not really bleak.
Sure. Yeah.
But again, there isn't a lot going on. There's just, it kind of links its way between, Zach's love for scenes for like little standout bits, little bits that are entertainment highlights. And it just kind of chugs between those, really. It doesn't do a lot. The survivors don't. They have less of a plan than the original movie. Even they just kind of get to the mall and then, like sunbathe on the roof and stuff. It feels like, and ask a dude to shoot celebrities that or zombies that look like celebrities. So, there's not a great deal of story going on here either, but it is an entertaining time.
That's fair. And that scene in particular is a good example of clearly that's the intention, just to have some fun stuff in there. You don't dress up a zombie like Jay Leno for nothing.
Right.
But so yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely memorable parts like that keep it ticking over, definitely. But I have my issues to take with it when we get there. But Steve, what did you think of the when we get to the mall, the story therein, if you like?
The one character has some kind of arc appears. Well, I say that unfairly, actually. There are two character arcs in this film, it feels like. There's Kenneth getting over the fact that he's not going to see his brother. And the CJ going from somewhat of an ass to slightly more likable, but still an ass.
Yeah.
Everyone else is kind of the same character throughout the entirety of the film. Yeah, so the only other character I can think of who's in danger of having an arc, and it's a kind of dark one, is the criminal guy whose name escapes me. And it literally is a case of, I'm going to bring a baby into this world because I was a bad person and I want to give it the best chance I got. Also, I'm going to kill innocent people and hide a zombie in the mall because reasons.
I looked it up, by the way. His name was Andre, but I literally looked it up because I didn't know either.
That's the thing. I remember Kenneth because I think it's the only character's name besides Steve that gets mentioned.
There's Kenneth. There's Tim Roth Light.
Tim Roth Light.
Yeah, I mean,
There's almost Handmaiden's Tale girl, the blonde, like the main character ish.
Anna.
Anna. Okay, yeah.
And the only reason I remember that is because right at the end of the film, it says, I'm going to stay here. I'll catch you later, Anna.
Tim Roth Light says that, yeah.
See, I put it down as John Hurt Light for me. But,
Oh, well, you see, to me, it was the Medium boyfriend, because there was an old TV show called Medium, and he played the boyfriend in that, and that's the only thing I remember.
Fair enough. I don't think many of these actors have been in a whole lot else.
Ving Rhames is the exception to the rule here.
Yeah.
Ty Burrell has went on to being in sitcoms and stuff like that, but mostly that's it. And Ving Rhames, who is if you took the inlay out of this DVD, you could make one and just slide it back in, and no one would know any different if you titled it Ving Rhames in Ving Rhames Detective, or Deputy, I guess. He's just playing himself in a cop outfit.
I watched a film that's just Ving Rhames versus zombies, but you know.
That's what this is. Well, actually, it's not really. It's not really. He doesn't do a whole lot of fighting with zombies, now I think about it.
It's peculiar because his character archetype is like grumpy badass with shotgun who's fed up of people's It is like fundamentally like one of the core characters to the point of you want to see him succeed even though he doesn't really have any appealing quality.
Yeah, kind of. Do you know why? It's because
he has a friendship with Andy. Come on.
It's because he has dialogue.
Yeah.
That kind of makes those two characters the most human in the movie.
Yeah. I mean,
their little relationship is actually kind of endearing. And a good idea that we haven't seen much before in a movie. Like the fact that they're separated and they kind of communicate from rooftop to rooftop. It's a fun little idea.
There's also little oh, sorry, go on, Steve.
I was going to say, for the benefit of viewers who can get hold of a DVD version, Andy has his own separate little mini arc that is kind of bleak, but also fairly developed as he's like dealing with all this stuff on his own. And it's technically part of the film, so I get away with it, even if it's a DVD extra. And seeing a man cope with not only being on his own and his only contact being Kenneth, that everything he knows is gone, he's starving, and he's losing his marbles at the end is pretty good. Like, it's a shame it was cut out of only on the DVD extras. And it also reveals that this is set in Wisconsin, which, looking geographically, the marina is not going to lead to a tropical island. I'm just going to say that right now.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. You know, as it's opening, it's talking about, obviously, it says it's in Wisconsin at the beginning. Well, it doesn't say Wisconsin, but it says, I live right next to Wisconsin, literally a stone's throw away is Wisconsin. And like, I recognize so many of the names, which I didn't first time I watched it, obviously, but when they started saying like Wabasha County, I was like, oh, I live like 30 minutes from there. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I was in
islands around there.
But yes, then I was like, no, there is no. I mean, I can't think of where they would have gone to get a boat and sailed like that in Wisconsin. It's a very landlocked state, so that was a little odd.
Just gonna hand wave that away as a parallel universe. If the geography's different.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
In terms of like Andy and stuff, and that's another one of those examples of things that I remember vividly from watching it all those years ago, even now. And there's a lot of those moments where it's like, oh, that's very well shot or whatever. It's just stuck with me, which is, him holding the sign up saying he's hungry, and then later on it's just like a blood smear, and you're like, oh no. So that's, cool moments like that are very well pulled off. But in terms of the sort of like wider story, this film has a problem in that compared to the original, for me, the time passes, and you've got these four characters and you get to know them a little bit and how they're dealing with each other. This film is much shorter, so you're not really afforded that so much. And also, it's like 4 times as many characters. They just seem to be coming out of the woodwork constantly. There's a blonde girl. I think literally the first time you see her is the obligatory early 2000s sex scene with her and Steve. I don't remember her showing up before then, but then suddenly they're filming themselves having sex, and it's like, who's that person? She's new. Like, they're just throwing characters at you. They're so unnecessary as well. Just absolutely unnecessary. So there's this whole part of the story where they're trying to figure out how the infection works and why people are rising as zombies. And Anna's whole thing is, she saw someone got bit, but she's not sure that that's what caused it. It's like, okay, realistically, that's a fair point. You are in a film, though, so you are allowed to sort of jump logic a little bit. And you've, look at the running time. You haven't got long to come to the conclusion. They really, really could have cut all of that down. You've got this lady that nobody knows the name of. She comes in infected. She gets up. Oh, she's a zombie and they have to kill her. And then immediately afterwards, they've got this also infected older gentleman that they wait to die, and then he gets up and they kill him. Why do you have to have both? Like, literally, you could have had one and then be like, oh yeah, but he was bitten, and then he came back, so it is the bite. Boom, done. It was so weird that they had two when they got such short amount of running time to deal with compared to the original. So that really bogged it down for me personally. But otherwise, the story is, fairly serviceable. I don't know. It feels like a slow burn to a massive action ending, and then the ending didn't really feel that deserved to me. I thought it was fun, but there wasn't a whole lot of weight to much of the stuff. It's because they were faffing around with all these multiple infections and too many characters for me.
It's the point where the young girl, whose name I cannot remember, but she's the daughter of said zombie man, decides, I am going to drive one of their only escape vehicles across the street to save a dog from a zombie that I about think, right, well, just leave her for dead. But no, they go on a stupid suicide mission to save her, and it pretty much all escalates and falls to bits from there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, until then, if the original Dawn, like in the Passage of Time thing, the original Dawn feels like it probably takes place over the course of months. This definitely is a week.
I think it is actually. I'm not sure if it's like the Andy's diary thing, but somewhere it's implied that it's like 2 weeks.
It feels like a day.
It does. It kind of does.
But in comparison between the two films, it's rapid. This degradation, and the zombies, bless them, they don't really they don't get much time to shine except when they're ripping people apart. Most of it's just people complaining at each other, which is, I suppose, okay. It feels like the Gunn and Schneider just basically looked at the cliff notes of what was Dawn of the Dead and said, right, more people, but there is no like real enemy people in this one. Which
right, there's no human threat.
Yeah, it kind of implicates that at the beginning with the 3 security guards, but then that doesn't really go where it should go.
Yeah, I actually like that. Like, as I said earlier, CJ goes from being unlikable to barely likable, and I actually like that he quote unquote redeems himself and still turns. He's basically complaining the entire time, and when he dies, he's affirming that he was right all along and that they're a bloody nursery school. But he still takes himself out to save the day. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I agree, but it's funny because he goes from sort of being. I guess the antagonist is a bit of a strong term, but nonetheless, that, and then he just gets replaced with other new guy that shows up that's a bigger arsehole. Okay, fair enough, I guess.
Put me in a room with Steve and CJ, and I've gone with one bullet. I'm shooting Steve. It's not hard.
I'm lining them up, yeah.
So there is one other point, I guess, of story that comes through from the original, which is the pregnancy story, and this one they spend a lot more direct time on, and they actually sort of kind of see it through to fruition. Like, literally, we have a zombie baby. I didn't hate it. I thought that actually mostly held up quite well. You could sort of see the aspect they were going for. That horrible green lighting may have been a bit too much. Like, I get it, it's gross, but you don't need to make it look like the inside of vomit or something. It's a bit odd. But, I guess it was kind of bold and it works quite well. Adam, what did you think of the pregnancy arc?
It was like another Snyderism, it was like a...
I've not really seen much of his stuff, to be fair, so I wouldn't know. Just
in the terms of, like, he likes a certain shot,
Mm-hmm.
He's very much a visual director.
Right. Yeah,
if you watch any of his other stuff, he's very visually focused and not necessarily a fantastic director, but he does a lot of visual stuff well. And this was kind of like a shocking quote unquote scene that I feel, was definitely serviceable. It was entertaining, as much as it maybe didn't make too much sense character wise. Andre kind of seems to be out of sorts a little bit when it all goes down, and it didn't necessarily feel like his character would act that way.
It was a bit of a jump,
to instantly be like, I'm going to shoot this lady when my girlfriend's clearly a freaking zombie, like not even like gonna turn into a zombie.
Yeah.
But again, it was it was a fun little moment, and it's not something you always see, so I can't really complain about it.
Steve, thoughts on this particular moment?
See, zombie children and zombie babies always felt like, up until the early 2000s, like a taboo, a line one must not cross. And this is obviously around the time of, we haven't done the game yet, so spoilers, Dead Space 2, when they were doing like weird children monsters and things like that as well. So it feels very trying to make a statement while also being grotesque.
Yeah.
But I don't think any other like zombie media has really touched on it. I mean, you'll have the odd child zombie who's just like, just literally a ghoul, but a baby and a person carrying it to term, only for it to turn out to be one of these, is pretty dark cinema that kind of stays with you, in my opinion. Like my partner is like anything to do with babies, she loves them. Like she loves like watching anything about babies and whatnot. So the second that we're watching this, it pretty much like hit her in the core. I don't know if it's just like, those maternal instincts are being shattered, seeing a heavily CG zombie face on a baby. But it's definitely one of those things that I imagine even at the time people were talking about when they left the cinema. Yeah. Like they were talking about that and the intro, I think, is the most, maybe they're debating, did they live at the end? So yeah, it's definitely a standout moment for the film, whether it be grotesque or not.
Isn't it the DVD cover is basically like a zombie baby face, isn't it? Or a zombie child?
It's the
face.
child. It's the child zombie's head.
So
there's two versions. There's one that's just like a horde of people on a sunset silhouette, like kind of like the Justice League cartoon intro, only zombies.
So yeah, obviously it's a big part of. They were hoping that was going to land, and it feels like part of the marketing almost. The zombie kids and the zombie baby. I don't argue it did. What it did weirdly do, to move on to tone a little bit, it actually, so the racism tones of the original film, not so much here. There's a little bit in places. You get Kenneth and Andre sort of talking about their upbringings and sort of like the displacement of black youth. I was like, that's a nice nod, but you don't really get any more than that. The commercialism thing, Ving Rhames' character basically rushes to get that scene out. It's way too early in the film for them to start musing about the zombies, unlike 78, where it's much closer to the end. And they sort of do it the opposite way around. In the classic Dawn of the Dead, they say maybe they're coming after us, and Peter says, well, maybe they're just sort of drawn here for some reason. And in this version, they go, maybe they're just drawn here. And Ving Rhames goes, no, they're coming after us. And that's it. Boom. The tone that this film does have, the theme that this film has, I thought was really interesting, is it has these weird mothering tones to it throughout the film. So the first zombie that you come across, first zombie you see is a kid. You've got the zombie pregnancy thing we just talked about. Michael, the John Hurt character, says that his job, the job he was best at was being a dad. Nicole loses her father. I guess that's kind of related, so it's sort of parental based, and then she sacrifices herself over her love of her pet. I don't know what the film's trying to say. I guess being a parent will kill you. Maybe that's what it's getting at.
Being a parent will kill you.
It seems to keep coming up, and I was like, this is weird.
Ken Ving Rhames' character is like, I gotta go get my brother.
Yeah. And he's definitely the dad of the group, let's be honest. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely some family stuff in there, but I don't know what the payoff is.
It's funny how they instantly would go and try and save the girl who went after the
his
dog.
Brother has to wait.
Well, not only that, but Andy. Like, if you're going to run over there and save her, why didn't you do that for Andy?
To begin with, yeah. I mean,
right.
If they've been there months like the original film, okay, sure, the person you know is in jeopardy. But they've been there like 2 weeks, as I said, so, I mean, it sucks, but never mind.
They did it for Mr. Chips.
Yeah, that's right.
Dog's name.
It's funny, Chips, yeah. It's funny how, like, the original had so much more of a social commentary than this one does, even though it's so much more dated.
I guess making way for just plain old entertainment.
Yep. And it is an entertaining movie, at least.
I agree with that, yeah.
I can't say that it was a bad movie, because even on my rewatch, it was entertaining. It wasn't, it was short enough that I could just enjoy it and didn't have too much that was trash.
Any more plot or theme thoughts before we move on?
I don't know how to bring this up in any smooth way, but is it just my interpretation, or are they trying to be a bit critical of gay people in this film? It feels like they use the one gay character as a joke, and I do not like that at all.
I can't even remember. There's a gay
Me
character?
either.
Well, that's fine. There's a scene where the choir organ fellow is basically talking about his sexual experiences to CJ while they're imprisoned, and it's played off as some kind of weird joke, and it just makes me feel like, why? Why is this in the film? It's very strange. That there's, like I said, it's the one scene that kind of really irks me about this film. In the way
There is also a quick cut shot of the older gentleman wearing like tights and women's shoes in the shoe store.
Oh, right.
Which is just literally like a 5-second cut of him prancing around in women's shoes, and it's like, okay, what was that for?
Yeah, that sounds like early 2000s nonsense to me. Yeah. Fair point though. I do remember what you were talking about, and I didn't make any notes on it, but I remember being like about it, you know.
It seems a bit mean-spirited, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get to characters, let's talk about zombies at least a little bit. I don't have a whole lot to say, so just quickly getting out of the way. As I said, the film is 17 years old now or something like that. I thought, in terms of the makeup and effects, pretty solid. Rolled out well, didn't really have any issues with it. As I said, the zombie baby still looks alright to me. The only problem I had was sort of like that. Like the original, they kind of lost presence. You know, the intro's really exciting, and they're all there in the outro, but from, the middle of the film, they're not really there. You don't even get them sort of clearing out the mall. Maybe that's the difference maker. And again, it's also about the runtime, I suppose. They want you to spend time with all these characters for some reason that I don't care about. But I feel like the zombies were sort of missing in the middle of this film. Steve, what do you think of the zombies?
For what screen time they get, they feel like a constant threat.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like, unlike the first, I keep saying the first film like they are a sequel, and the original.
Yeah.
They feel like that walks a line between comedy and seriousness or tragedy, whereas these ones, they feel like killing machines. Like, as Adam hit on earlier with, like, Anna's husband, and that the instinct is just to kill, to eat. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter what. If they can get close, they're going to rip you apart.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a point where I think it's played off a bit right at the start, where they're getting into the mall, and there's one person who looks almost fine at a distance, and then he turns, has an arm off, and he's in a full maniacal sprint to try and rip them apart. I thought it was great. They never feel like they are in any form to be other than just killing things, which is what makes them pretty strong. I like them more than the 28 Days Later, like, running zombie types as well, because they have that level of, I want to say, there's hate behind their eyes in 28 Days Later, whereas this, they feel like they've just tried to make them instinctually, habitually killing machines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll get off my pulpit, but I thought the zombies were all right to me. But when they did, they really did do well.
100% agree. As I say, my opinion is always don't silly up your zombies, so high marks from me because there isn't any zombies doing goofy things in this. Yeah, okay, you get some dressed up silly, but they weren't like performing song and dance, so I'm happy. Adam, what did you think of the zombies in the 2004 version?
Yeah, they're fine. They're definitely, like I was saying about the Romero Dawn of the Dead, where they seem to have a lot of character to them. This is not the case, and it works for the movie. It's a lot faster paced.
Mm-hmm.
They are all just kind of very instinctual killing machines, essentially. I like the fact that I wish we would have seen a bit more. I guess it's only 2 weeks, so I like the fact that they are a little faster. It makes more sense to me. I always feel like a zombie would start off pretty fast, and then as time goes by, it would get slower as its body degrades.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any issues with the speediness of the zombies. The only issue I have is, and again, it's fine because it's a movie, but with the speediness of those zombies and how dangerous they are, I feel like no one would have got to that mall.
Yeah.
You know, it would just be over and done with. Everything would be completely wrecked. The mall would probably be like full of zombies as well. But again, it's a movie, and that's fine. I don't have a lot to say about them. They are consistent with their zombies. The time frames of people turning is consistent, which I like. I hate it when you get a movie
Yeah, definitely.
where someone is just like they've been bitten, and then they're the ones that hold on for days, and they're like, you know, it's nice that everyone that gets bitten pretty much dies in a similar time frame and comes back almost immediately. There's no like, this guy just came back and you waited so long or whatever. I like the consistency.
There is one thing with that, which I guess is the boyfriend right at the beginning who immediately turns. But arguably, you know, you can always say, depending on where the bite is, how quickly it gets into the bloodstream.
Yeah, he gets the neck shot, so he probably bleeds out pretty fast.
Exactly.
So.
He probably just went straight down. So, otherwise, I agree, definitely. So characters, we talked about a lot of them in the plot. So, yeah, it remains to be seen how much there is to talk about. There is a lot of them, but I don't have a whole lot to say on most of them. They pretty much exist to die. That is what it comes down to, especially when you get to that crazy ending with the armoured buses and stuff. Many of them will just sort of vanish very quickly. I found Michael to have some likeableness to him. I thought he was very easy to like. He's obviously designed that way. But it's hard not to think of him at the end of the film as a complete idiot. Because he has this whole bit where he's like, look at this great idea. I've got a chainsaw and a hole in the truck, and we can push it along the hole and get the zombies off the side of the truck. And you just think, yeah, it's going to go horribly wrong. So his idea, which, you know, doesn't have any kind of safety precautions, it's not attached to the side of the truck, it's literally just a chainsaw and a hole, goes horribly wrong, and he's responsible for 2 deaths because of it. So way to go, John Hurt. You didn't really work out for you, did it? Other than that, I think I've said my piece on most of them. Adam, any standout characters for bad or for good?
No, not really. Yeah, they're pretty all just kind of like tropes as far as it goes. There's not a lot of progression there. I do enjoy most of the characters for what they are, but I don't have a lot to say about them, really.
Yeah, fair point. Steve, any standout characters?
It's weird. You know when you get those films where you have characters you want to root for? Like in the original Dawn of the Dead, I kind of do. I really do root for Peter, and I do root for Fran. In this film, I really don't care. Like it's more. I want that person to die for my entertainment. You know, saying that, I did feel kind of gutted for him in that, you know, they completely fluffed saving Andy, who literally is a man with a sign and therefore has some kind of attachment. I believe it was Love Actually that first did that, but what you know, that's kind of sad. Everything else is kind of like, I mean, you're kind of funny in quips, but you know, just punch Steve out. That's all I want. I'm glad he dies.
I think, yeah. I mean, to be fair, props to his acting. Then I guess, you know, he's definitely the heel. You want to see him lose.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
he's fantastic in that role, especially when he's like, "Yeah, maybe we should all just get on my boat," and everyone goes, "That's a great idea," and he's like, "Oh, I wasn't actually being serious." You know, you want to see him turn into a zombie.
He's designed to be unlikable slime, and therefore you like him because he's unlikable slime.
Exactly, he fit for purpose.
Yeah. It's like Adam said, they're a bag of tropes. I think the main reason I like Ving Rhames' character is because I just like Ving Rhames as an actor.
Oh yeah, pretty much. He's just a cool dude.
Yeah, I mean, he's Shaft, for sake.
Exactly. It's a
How
quote
many
the great Ving Rhames.
3, 4.
What's that line? There's a particular line that I absolutely love of his. It's something like, "What if I stick my foot up your ass? Then would that be your problem?" Like that, it's just like the Ving Rhamesiest, you know. Right then, let's wrap up 2004. Final thoughts on the film. For me, bit of a rush job, but I understand what they're going for. As we said multiple times, it's about the entertainment, and it is fun. I didn't think it was bad by any means. All my little nitpicks aside, I'd say, you know, a 6 out of 10, and that's above average. So It's done all right. I think it's good that they went other ways for it, rather than trying to do a shot for shot or trying to recast those characters. I think could have been kind of dicey. It's no patch on the original for me, but it's good fun. And in a way, because it's much less bleak, it's probably more rewatchable. Adam, what are your thoughts on the 2004? Do you prefer it?
I don't know if I prefer it, but like you say, the length of it and the feeling it has does make it more rewatchable.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go back to this before I went back to the original. And that's not saying I think the original is worse. For everything I said about the original, I still believe it's a better film than this.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a more entertaining film. And that for that reason, I would go back to this easier. And the runtime, obviously. So, yeah, it's, like you said, 6 out of 10. It's definitely a serviceable film. It's a fun film. It's a good film I think it's a good film to show people that who isn't nowadays, but aren't necessarily super familiar with the genre.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
This is one of the better films, the more entertaining films to show someone.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, final thoughts on the Dawn of the Dead remake?
Well, this film is, I would say, the inferior of the original. It has some quirks in how it's constructed, how it is portrayed, in terms of zombie-related media, that have clearly stood out well enough for other things to emulate, lesser things to straight up rip off and do it badly, starring Mila Jovovich. So, in part, this is almost like the start of a really good Raccoon City film that then goes to a mall and they sit there for a bit and then everyone dies.
Put that on the back of the box.
Out literally as a strong contender for a good Resident Evil film, and then it goes to the mall and tries to just be boring for a bit, and then zombies take over. Here are some characters that you may or may not like. I don't know. It's strange putting the two films next to each other now. I'm really trying to weigh up which one I would choose to watch over the other, and I think it's still the original, despite how critical I am and how much I'm meant to really like the remake. So, yeah, the Johnny Crash intro is pretty badass though, and the ending is astoundingly good. I think it was the first time in my young memory I'd seen like a mid-credits and almost post-credits stingers and stuff like that, where it is unearned, but it is a nice wrapping up that it's vague enough that maybe they get out all right, but probably they've been torn to shreds anyway, which is almost like an homage to the original ending that never was in Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, fair point, actually. I agree with that. I did like the way that the ending was stylized with sort of like the footage of the camcorder on the boat, and then the suddenly very bleak ending, because I would assume that is the all she wrote for those characters. And then immediately after that, just to remind you that this is a film released in 2004, smash cut to Disturbed's Down with the Sickness where the credits play. Just the most 2000s thing ever.
Is there a zombie Warwick Davis in a coup? And it looks like it's like Warwick Davis in a water cooler on that boat, dressed as a zombie towards the end on that videotape.
It's a head in a water cooler.
Yeah, I don't think it's Warwick Davis's head.
Yes. It does kind of look like it, but yeah, it's just a head for some reason.
I don't know what that's about. Fill in the gaps there if you like, your own little story, your little headcanon of how that happens. But it very much reminds me, they're getting really in the weeds now, we need to finish out. There's a film called Return of the Living Dead 2, which is another one of those taped off of TV films that my dad did for me. It's very much more like a comedy zombie film. And there is a zombie head that exists for, it's not like 45 minutes, that movie. It seems to just keep cropping up and follow them around. I think it's like the mascot of the franchise for all I know. I've no idea, but it seems to have a rather important role. Maybe it's a reference to that. I have no idea, but it's a talking zombie head. It's jaw jacking little guy. There's some nostalgia for anyone who remembers that film, maybe. I don't know. But it's nostalgia for me.
Does it mean that Steve's like in the Mafia then? Like he's got the severed head of his enemy, water cooler or something?
Oh my god, I love that. Yeah, let's go with that. That's better.
But
But it was on a dinghy, though. It wasn't on the boat.
Oh, that's true.
Oh.
Yeah, that's true. It was on a boat that they found, right? So
Yeah.
Would be
For some
cool if
reason.
Steve was like a mafia tough, but without the backup, he's a complete weed.
Yeah, he's Fredo.
Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors and our Patreons once again. Support the show for as little as $1 a month to help us create more bonus content like this one over at patreon.com/FASprayPod. You can also join the Discord server to get in touch with members of the team and our community, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's recorded. You can find a link to the server, as well as our Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, and more over at faspraypod.com. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review where you can. It helps spread the word. Our next bonus episode sees us, as Steve kind of sort of briefly mentioned, back to the town of Silent Hill as we look at perhaps the most critically acclaimed game in the series, Silent Hill 2. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of us individually. I'm at Syniac_123, Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken, and Adam is at AdVickers01. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. Brains.
Brian.
We didn't talk about
Brian.
soundtracks.
Red versus Blue. Wow, we didn't.
Fair point.
I just
guess.
realised.
The original
Prog rock.
soundtrack is pretty decent and iconic in that I've never heard another film besides Shaun of the Dead use it. And if I hear a bit from it, I know it's from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
God, that soundtrack. There are parts of it though that, like, there's the part where they're in the gun shop, and for some reason it might be on a TV or something, but there's just a chimp screaming,
What?
and I just can't get over it.
So it feels very like what I imagine American infomercials are like in terms of background sounds at times,
Yes.
but with a horror tone. And
Yes.
then, Dawn of the Dead 2004 is just like generic early 90s
New metal.
stuff.
Bit of, bit of
Come on,
Richard
get down with the
Cheese.
shit, lads. Get the fucking number down. Oh, God. As soon as you boot up the DVD as well, it starts screaming at you. Oh, God.
Oh, dear.
Anyway.
So you can edit that bit in then.
Yeah, totally. That's staying in.
That'll be at the end.
Yep. You always got to have a bumper.
It's funny. I keep thinking about my first time watching it. I really do think my first reaction is, "Oh my God, it's Keenan's dad." Ken Faree.
Is it actually? I didn't know if you were joking or not.
Keenan Kel. He's Keenan's dad.
Oh my God, I didn't even realise that.
Kel loves orange soda. He does.
Is it
Oh
true?
my God, it is.
It's true.
I do.
Did you also know that the bloke who plays Roger is also known as Prince Gore? He is an actual prince of a Western Afghanistan not continent, but an area of Western Afghanistan.
What?
That's a real thing. I did loads
How did
of
that not come up?
come up now.
He's a prince in Afghanistan. I just know he's like an American general briefly in the fucking remake. I didn't realise he was actual royalty.
I looked it up because I was just reading random pages.
If this
after I
isn't the
watched it.
bumper, I'm going to be very upset that you just
All
don't
right, let me
have
just
the
read-
Whole
bumpers.
bit's the bumper.
Let me read the Wikipedia. In 2004, it was
Wikipedia?
revealed that what's his name? Scott Rayner is the Prince of Gore, a province in Western Afghanistan. Rayner's great-great-great-grandfather, Josiah Harlan, was the first American to set foot in Afghanistan, so he was granted sovereignty
What?
in perpetuity for himself and his descendants. Ergo,
What?
this guy is Prince Gore. He doesn't really bring it up, apparently. This is
Sovereignty
an anecdote, but...
I mean, but
When you
First
said Prince
zombie
of
on
Gore,
film,
I
man.
thought you was going to say he was a new member of GWAR or something. The Prince of Gore.
yeah,
Get up, come on, get down.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
On point.
Prince Gore. There you go, it's a trivia.